Welcome to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. Appreciate everyone being here, getting a little bit of ambient noise there, but I think we're going to wrap that. We took care of that already. This is obviously a very disturbing story. For those of you who are joining us this morning on the Donna Adelson hearing, going to be a much different tenor today, but thank you for being with us this morning, and thank you for coming back now. Just to lay it out very quickly, this is about a former Stoughton, Massachusetts police detective who's now been federally indicted in the death of Sandra Birchmore. He is accused, Matthew Farwell is, of killing her and then staging her apartment to make it appear that she had committed suicide. He is accused, Matthew Farwell, who's now 38 years old, of having a physical relationship with Birchmore from the time that she was 15 until 23, killing her sometime after she told him that she was pregnant with his child, and federal prosecutors, they indicted him, as I said, on Wednesday, and in that press conference said that he killed her to prevent her from revealing their relationship and the alleged crimes tied to it. Obviously, it would not go over well in a police department, as he is finding out now. Our best guest here to discuss this, Agent Scott Duffey. It's usually a pretty relaxed, fun Friday with Phil and Scott, but Phil had a prior commitment, and Scott, being the mensch that he is still here on a Friday, even though I think he's at his beach house and would probably rather be dipping his toes in that Atlantic Ocean. Scott is a retired FBI agent out of the Delaware office, and he's director of Wilmington University's Criminal Justice Institute. He also served as a police officer. And then, of course, we've got Anna Sonoda over her left shoulder. You can see Duck, Duck, Groom. That is her book. In 2020, she set out to re-educate adults about child sex abuse, or CSA, by concentrating on grooming, which is the precursor to essay, sexual abuse. She released her debut book, Duck, Duck, Groom, Understanding How a Child Becomes a Target, back in December 2022, and that is a must for all parents. Last but not least, Sierra One Consulting's Rob D'Amico. He served his country for 39 years, both in the military and the FBI. The guy's just a badass. He is part of the hostage rescue team, used to fire 100,000 rounds of ammunition a year to make sure he was staying prepared for whatever came his way in the FBI. Before we go any further, I'm just going to defer to Anna. This is something that's come up, and the COE made me aware of it. These are really serious charges, but people, especially victims, and there are victims who watch this show, have an obvious hard time hearing the R word that would rhyme with pape. So, Anna, to you, I know you know this, obviously, about triggering people. So what is the preferred language that we use in this show and just in general?
Thank you, Joel. Thank you for having me on with this excellent panel, and thank you for addressing this subject with such sensitivity. Instead, and in lieu of using some of the terminology, even though we all understand the severity of this case and the severity of these crimes, I think it is wise for us to label this as child sexual abuse. We can refer to it as child sexual abuse, or we can refer to it as CSA moving forward for this episode. But I think the most sensitive and conscientious way to move forward is to label all of the activity between this predator and this minor child as CSA, or child sexual abuse.
Scott Duffey, you're one of the best at what you do, and also an empathetic soul. When you heard about this story and you did some research on it, these are law enforcement officers, swore to protect and serve. What's your gut reaction after finding out what they did or what they're alleged to have done, especially Matthew Farwell?
Yeah, I mean, this is the classic where somebody abuses their power, whether it be a coach, somebody in a ministry, somebody who has regular control and looked up by juveniles. So here you have a police officer in our society is supposed to be the person, especially when that uniform is on, that no matter what is going on in someone's life, they can reach out for that police officer almost like an anchor, a life preserver in life. And so it really rocks my core when I see somebody who wore a badge like myself, like Rob, like the thousands of troops every day who are just going to work, hoping to return back to their families. And when someone like this, who's alleged to have just violated the very, very basic trust of a juvenile, a citizen, a member of our community, and then to have taken that to the next step. I mean, it is just it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking for Sandra, for the family of Sandra, for anyone in Sandra's shoes who have been or who have suffered at the hands of another, especially someone they've trusted. It's just, it is to me, the worst of the worst.
By the way, Jenny in chat, I'm leaving up Sandra's picture for a little bit longer, is reminding us this is not just so far this one officer has been indicted, but his twin brother is also allegedly involved in the grooming process and taking advantage of her being a minor child, as well as another officer. Who knows? Possibly more will come to the surface. But Rob D'Amico, before we get into kind of the details of this and why the feds got involved and all those sorts of things and some of the text messages, Scott just mentioned you wore a badge too. I was with you in a restaurant a few weeks ago, and you said I was joking with you about what to do in a mass shooting situation. Not really joking, but asking you what to do. And you said that you couldn't leave the restaurant because there were some kids in there. How badly does this eat at you that this is a person who wore a badge, who swore to serve and protect, and is now really putting a black eye on all of law enforcement across the nation?
First, I wouldn't leave that restaurant no matter what, kids or no kids. I think I mentioned protecting the kids first. But no matter what, if someone came in that restaurant, I was going to go right at them. But I think this is this is the worst. It doesn't get any worse than this. And having worn the badge, it is even more so. And I think that a guy like him is worse than just a common criminal. And I mean that, and a common criminal is what he is. There's a whole bunch of reasons behind it, but he's doing something, but he's not falsely pretending to be someone to protect the community, and then using that status, that trust and confidence that he has, that parents put into it, that people put into it, to do the worst thing imaginable, and starting to groom her, and then have a relationship with her, and then when this happened, to actually kill her. I think it is worse in so many different ways. I get disgusted, almost like violently sick about it. And the other thing is, I'm tired of the thin blue line culture saying, not saying anything when this happened. And I don't know exactly what transpired in that police department, but people knew something was going on, something wasn't right. And we'll talk about it, the culture and everything else. But as I've talked about on this one before, I see tons of LinkedIn and Facebook posts of police officers and law enforcement doing unbelievably heroic things. And then all the friends that I have in connection saying this is what should go out there about police work, and it should. But also on the opposite side, all the law enforcement need to stand up on things like this and say, wait a second, this is even worse, and coming out and just being transparent and saying bad people get in here, and that we have to really correct it as a culture within the law enforcement. You can't just highlight the good stuff. You actually have to go after the bad stuff too. So I'm hoping this is a pivotal moment in law enforcement to come off that and say, we have to admit to some things like this, and then take true preventive action for it to not happen again.
I think that's a really interesting point that Rob makes. Take credit for the good, but also acknowledge the bad. And, these 99% of law enforcement officers, I think, are on the up and up. But this is giving them all at least a bad name right now. I think this comment, Anna, by Jimmy McNutty is actually sad but accurate. The badge is what makes this story unique. Otherwise, it doesn't make the primetime news. Sadly, kids are being groomed every day, and it does not get the media attention. Does he make a salient point here?
Absolutely, Joel. We know that most children, over 90%, are groomed and abused by somebody known and trusted. So in this case, it highlights the fact that this individual and the other two individuals who have been named were known and trusted, not just by this poor victim, Sandra, but also within the community. Predators are apt at figuring out how they can gain access with kids. And this program, which was led and orchestrated by the parent company of the Boy Scouts, which, we can go into talking about the Boy Scouts if you'd like to, but these programs have a responsibility. And unfortunately, when predators make their way into programs where children and adults mix, we need even more oversight. We need even more policies that protect not just the kids, but also protect the adults, so that your reputation, which is on the line every time you volunteer in an environment with minors, is also being protected.
I didn't know this, and I probably should, but Anna, just back to this, I can't believe his wife is supporting him. He married her while he was in a underage sexual child sex abuse situation with Sandra, and he married his wife and has 3 kids. If she's in fact supporting him right now, does this surprise you in any way? Is this a typical response from the spouse? She's obviously a victim, as are the 3 children that they have together.
Jill, this is not uncommon from what I researched and from my experience counseling convicted sex offenders. The majority of them were in long-term relationships, and when counseling those partners or spouses, the majority of them wanted to stay. This is not uncommon.
That's it doesn't surprise me. It just saddens me. Scott Duffey, why the feds here? Norfolk County, and by the way, there's a connection loosely with Karen Reed, Michael Proctor, who's the whose name will live in ignominy because of his participation in the Karen Reed trial. He was also involved in this, and so was the Norfolk County DA, who are still apparently investigating this. But Scott, why did the feds swoop in here first? Explain that to us.
Yeah, I'm not so sure it characterize it as why did the feds swoop in. It might have been something with regards to the police department reaching out and saying, hey, we got some issues and we need some outside help, where, just come in and do what you do best, and we'll offer whatever resources in this particular case. But on that note, you're dealing with a police officer. And so thereby in the Fed system, there is a thing called color of law. So when somebody abuses that power, that is such a high standard that the feds are able to come in and conduct an investigation, public corruption, whatever it is, where somebody abuses that power which is necessary. I mean, it is absolutely necessary for law enforcement to be trusted, because in anybody's, including anybody on this panel, when you are in need, you're going to reach out to law enforcement, and you need that basic requirement of trust. And when that trust is broken, you can see the ripple effect across the community, and so thereby the feds come in and they are able to conduct a thorough investigation. You're talking about a coroner, you're talking about conducting interviews that may have already been conducted during the initial, I'll put it in quotes, the suicide investigation, and then for several years later to come up with a coroner or anyone who is deemed in charge of assigning the manner cause of death to say, hey, there's a suicide. And then for the feds to come in and interview to say, why is this a suicide? How did you come to that conclusion? And then to go through everything else that probably hasn't been checked: digital media, cell phones of not only the victim but friends, and of course the actors here. And then to be able to come up with, hey, there is what the allegation brought us to this point, that is a complaint, brought us to this point in the first place, and to uncover evidence to be able to have the suicide reversed to a homicide. Those things that are important in order to bring justice to Sandra and every victim that may be potentially looking at this from afar. And so it is important that the feds be able to do this in a way that tries to restore some sense of trust, and ultimately bringing justice to Sandra, and not only removing this officer and anyone that is complicit in this, anyone. It may be so far as somebody who didn't know what they were necessarily doing, but offered their help because of their whatever relationship to the officer. So I imagine this is not the only arrest that we'll see here, and should not be, because you're talking about, as Rob said, the worst of the worst. This is a violation of trust at its very heart, and you need to do everything in your power, that is the feds here in this particular case, to try to undo some of the harm. And I'm specifically talking about the trust factor. Nothing is going to bring Sandra back, and so thereby that is why you have the FBI in this particular case being able to come in under the color of law, as opposed to, let's just remove, what if it wasn't a police officer? Would, the feds are involved in, as I have done, child predator cases, those who have traveled, with regards to going over state lines in order to seek a child out, or for those in possession or manufacturing child pornography, where the feds traditionally are involved. So I see it primarily as a color of law, and that is to try to restore the trust that has been broken by this police officer, and ultimately the department.
Yeah, you're talking about other officers, and this is one of them, Robert Devine. This picture is jarring just because you see how young and innocent and little Sandra Birchmore was when this really started to begin. But this officer, his name is Robert Devine. He also allegedly abused Sandra Birchmore when she was in high school, and was a mentor for her in this thing called the Explorers Program. I want to get back to that in a second, to the Explorers Program. And by the way, Scott mentioned other officers. At one point, Sandra's friend went to police to kind of tip them off to what had been happening, fearing that Sandra was in danger. And that person told Matthew Farwell, and that's probably likely the catalyst for what precipitated this alleged murder. So this is a really disturbing case with a lot of different tentacles. But Rob D'Amico, so he was indicted Wednesday. He was also arrested by, basically a SWAT team. First of all, let's just talk about that for a minute. We had the video. I'm not sure that we have it today, but this is Matthew Farwell here. But when you go in to make an arrest like this, it was what it looked to a layperson like me, like a SWAT team and additional officers. Why is it necessary to have that sort of, man/woman power on scene for that kind of an arrest?
Well, one, you always want to have an overwhelming presence on any arrest, and the FBI is looking at certain things. And if you look back, 2021, 2 FBI agents were killed down here in Fort Lauderdale, arresting a child predator. And when you start looking at things like that, they realize when their life is going to change dramatically. They most of them know what's going to happen in prison to child predators. You're not taking, like when we used to arrest gangbangers and stuff, a lot of them knew the system so well. They know they're going to get arrested and they're going to go into jail and they're probably going to come out and do other things. It's not an unknown to them. But when you're arresting like a doctor who's been doing healthcare fraud and he's living in a $10 million house, and his pajamas, cost more than all your clothes together. His life, what goes through their minds is very dramatic, and they're more likely to take some unbelievable violent action because of that. So now you have a cop child predator who's going to go to jail, and both child predators and cops are not liked in prison. And you're putting him in a thing where he is going to go away. So I think the reactions are of having a SWAT team. And I think if you look at, they arrested him in his dump truck away from his house. And that may be that they understood what weapons he had at his house, and that like you can't get the surprise factor that you really want unless you get a no-knock warrant and you breach the door type of thing. His son was in the vehicle. I don't think that was planned. I've heard some people talk about it like, oh, if his son was there, that's not what you want. I think that was probably a surprise to the FBI, but they're planning on doing something where he left his house where maybe he had weapons to go to work and then put him in a spot like this. I think it was a shopping center parking lot, probably wasn't open yet, less people. So the FBI is always looking at least risk to both the person being arrested and the people around it. And I don't think they planned on the son being there. That was probably something that happened that they still had to go through with it. But it's one of those cases. I've arrested police officers in marked vehicles in Miami. We had a big problem back when I was in the FBI down here with some very bad cops escorting drug loads in their marked cruisers. And here you have in the middle of Miami, black Suburbans with FBI SWAT guys jumping out on a marked vehicle. Like you talk about the potential for some very bad things happening, but it's something that you have to do at a certain point because you have to, again, with that case, we had to arrest them in the process of what they were doing based on everything else. So it's a challenge, but I'm sure that the FBI took a lot of time in looking at this. I'm sure they understood that this was coming, and he probably understood it was coming too, but it's still probably a surprise to him and how it happened. But the planning for it, maybe something happened either in the legal system or something else that said, hey, we have to do it this day. I don't know, but that's a lot of times what happens when you're looking at it, you're getting information, you have enough for the arrest warrant and the indictment, but you're still looking for that most opportune time. But then sometimes something happens that pushes you forward and say, hey, we have to do it now. And you're just taking the least risky option on the table.
Yeah. By the way, FBI agents in a black Suburban arresting patrol officers in patrol cars is, if that's going to happen anywhere, it's going to happen in Miami. So there you go. My great hometown now. Mish Cavernos, Cape Town, South Africa. Question for Anna. Why do people never think about their own kids? Are they, quote unquote, too set on getting what they want and nothing else matters? Or maybe they think they won't get caught? I mean, great question. I've asked this before. He has 3 kids. His wife was giving birth. Matthew Farwell's wife was giving birth the night he allegedly killed Sandra Birchmore, which is just, I mean, absolutely crazy to try to, to process that. But what's the answer to this question, Anna?
Well, we could be here all afternoon. I think the best answer to this question is predators want what they want, and they will stop at nothing to get it. They will lie, cheat, manipulate in order to get whatever it is that they want. And in this case, which is not uncommon, we have a man who, by all appearances, looks and upholds a lot of the values that build in trust and a sense of knowing what he stands for, what his values are. And unfortunately for his spouse and his children, they will now have this disgrace as a direct result of their father's choices to move and progress along the path of grooming and abuse to ruin Sandra's life. And anybody along that path could have said something or done something to have altered the outcome here. And we all have an opportunity to learn something from this case.
Yeah. By the way, Anna, I think was on earlier this week. I already lost track of days, about the Maddie Soto case, which is a story of a 13-year-old who was allegedly murdered by her mother's boyfriend, which is also just beyond the pale. He faces the death penalty. This guy, by the way, Farwell, this is a death penalty eligible case, and the acting U.S. attorney in Massachusetts basically deferred to the Department of Justice, saying that they'll make the ultimate decision. But if there's ever a case where the death penalty is warranted, this just might be it. But Anna, just back to you on this. The mother and grandmother of Sandra Birchmore, who were basically her caretakers, the mom, obviously, and then the grandmother, both died the same year when she was a young girl. What kind of impact do you think this had on the fact that she, was able to be groomed? She didn't have that strong, maternal and great and grandmotherly connection anymore to protect her?
Well, we have to start by backing up a second and saying that predators are selective. They do not groom everybody. They select. They're very intentional about who they choose to groom. So if I'm a potential predator and I look at Sandra's life, I recognize that she's seeking mentorship from adults. She's putting herself in environments where she's looking for somebody to look up to and to mentor her. Unfortunately, she was relying on her mother and her grandmother for caretaking. And because of that empty space, because of the void that was created as a result of that trauma and loss, which no child should ever lose a parent, let alone losing a parent and a grandparent in the same year, we can all relate to the idea that she was even more in a position of vulnerability because she was seeking out affection, attention, recognition from somebody. And this predator recognized it and thought, great, this is a perfect target. And if parents only recognize that predators are very adept at recognizing vulnerability on the part of our own children, that we have to fill that space. We have to be the ones to recognize, oh, there's a gap. Oh, you feel like you're not being listened to or appreciated. And that's our opportunity to step up.
She's absolutely, I having 4 kids, I went through the same thing. I was very, very much paying attention to what was happening because these predators test it. Like a lot of times they tell you tell your kids that if someone touches you in the privates, you tell me. Well, that's not the first thing that happens. They will, there's no reason a grown man should compliment a 12-year-old girl that she looks pretty. Like that is a yellow flag. And then they'll like touch their hair and they're fixing their, but they'll always have an excuse to go back to that looks like, oh, they're just a nice guy. And the test is, if it comes back that he did this, or she did this. Oh, maybe I don't want to go to this child because they are capable of talking. So these little tests go in until, like she said, they get to a point where they say, this is my victim, because there's no one to talk to, that they're looking for things, and they're not telling people of the little things that these tests are, and they're constantly doing that. And I was so hyper aware of it. I probably ruined some of my children's activities, because I sat there when my son went in the Boy Scouts, and I looked at that stage with all those parents up there, and one of his friends' mom was there, and I said, well, just percentage wise, 2 of them are probably active pedophiles, 5 of them have been thinking about it, and 10 of them have thoughts. And she looked at me and said, how do you go through life thinking like that? And I said, how do you go through life not thinking like that? Because I don't want to be in that position that I put my kids into something that has potential like that. And that's what happened. I'm sure Sandra's mom thought the Police Explorer program is a great way to get the right influence in your child's life. And here it's a 180% the opposite, where you're putting them into, and the parents probably said, no, this is good, as these tests were going down. And then when her grandmother and mother died, it was probably one of those manipulating things. And unfortunately, as we said, these horrible people saw that as the opportunity to move forward. And that's what they're looking. They put themselves in these positions of trust and confidence. We talk about the Boy Scouts, the church, and all these other things. They're in positions where, one, parents and everyone else will believe them more than a child a lot of times. And 2, that's where their parents think that this trust and confidence is, and these people purposely put themselves in it. I never let my kid be on a team where a coach didn't have an own child on the team. Not that it prevents it, but I just thought, like, well, why are you coaching a team if you have no children on it? It just was one of those yellow flags that I would not put up with. And I'm sorry, like, I would pull them out and put them on somewhere else. Like I said, I probably ruined some of my kids' childhood stuff, but it's one of those things. In order to prevent it, you have to kind of, as a parent, be hyper vigilant on that. And I'm going to grab your book. I hadn't heard of it before. I gave my children the book Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker to read, because it talks about predicting violence. And unfortunately, a lot of it is, some of them are victims of the same thing themselves, and they turn into that. But that's not an excuse. It's just, when you look at propensity for this to happen, researching who your children are around is very important.
Yeah, Anna's book is called Duck, Duck, Groom. It is a must-read for parents. I'm in the Rob D'Amico camp of things. I definitely, and the COE, we both lean on the side of being overcautious. These are, for the most part, great organizations, but you meet a Cub Scout leader who doesn't have kids, and there's no way my kid is going to be in that whatever you call it, unit or whatever. But Scott Duffey, Black Widow from the Republic of Ireland, can't do an Irish accent. She wants to know, and this question came up when we did this story yesterday, who do you report to when it's officers involved? It's hard to go to the police department. We saw what happened. Her friend did that. Her friend went to the Stoughton PD or the Canton PD. I'm not sure which now. I think it was Stoughton. And Sandra Birchmore was killed in Canton, by the way, which is where all the stuff, the Karen Reed story took place. But who do you go to if you can't go to the police, Scott?
You can go to the police, just not that police department, probably. So and that's why I really stress the fact that as we're all disgusted by this, and then of course this is not singular, and this is not in a vacuum. It is amazing when you start to work these cases, and it's like drug addiction. You realize just how many drug addicts there are in it, and it's like you're pushing against a tide. But the idea is this, and in I won't say which department, but a department close to me, it hit close to home with a officer very well respected and known throughout the community, and recently arrested for for the abuse of a child in his care. So, and what did this child do? The child did exactly what you would hope. Talk to somebody who is an adult who you do trust, because there is just that open communication, and in this case, a school counselor, and allow, and what that child is doing is bouncing an idea off and say, I've had this secret, I've had this thing going on, and so what are your thoughts? Is this something that I should continue or whatnot? And it is that trained counselor, that trained helper that's, okay, bring that to me, that trust, and then with a very um, um, a good effort of many different individuals involved, that of the parents, and then of course school, and then to go to the police department. That is a good sized police department, and bring in the top, and be able to say, okay, this is what we got going on, and then of course a investigation ensued. So it's a combination of, who do you go to? Somebody at school, and and like anything else, and I believe the FBI will be able to, if they already haven't gathered information of who Sandra was talking to, friends and cohorts, and perhaps other adults, and maybe she's starting to put information out there. And then, as if you're in possession of a singular piece of information that it's a red flag, and you're not sure what to do with it, then to go to somebody who within a school, or another adult that you already have a very good trust relationship with, and just start talking it out, to where somebody is able to say, hey, can I take this to the next step? And not scaring off that individual, but bringing that victim closer to the vest, to get this to where it needs to. And that is a good investigation that's going to result in an arrest and a quick removal of this person from doing harm to anybody. So it's ultimately, there's always somebody that is trusted, and getting that information out, and then that person, whoever it is, realizing, I need to now bring this to somebody else, and not put a lid on it or whatever.
A couple quick things, and we'll get into the text messages for a little while after that. But this is an interesting comment. Predators are excellent profilers. Anna, is that an accurate statement?
Bingo. That's it. That's it. But what we have to remember is that predators run on gas. They run on grooming, access, and space. So if you suspect grooming, which we've talked about before, Joel, four F's of grooming: flattery, favoritism, forbidden fruits, and fear. If you suspect any of those, then you have to regulate access and space. What happened in this case with Sandra? Unfortunately, she was given time alone with this individual. He started taking her to the library. He started offering to tutor her. He used social media. These are very predictable steps, because it isolates her from a very difficult home situation already, and makes her feel as if she's being flattered and given attention. And so we, as caregivers and as parents, and for your audience, you need to look out for gas. And in this case, we have so many examples of the gas that was fueling this predation, not just for Matthew, but for the other individuals who have also been alleged in these crimes.
By the way, I asked you this last time, but can you say again, Rob?
Her book is so needed. Like I said, people don't get this, and it's one of those things, when your kids are out there, you don't want to believe it's happening. You don't want to believe that this person who is the best, they're going to be the best at what they do and do this. And that's on purpose. Like you said, they're profiling, but they're also the biggest, liars that can put on the mask because they know what people look for when you look for predators, and they're not going to be it. Like, again, I'm going to buy a whole bunch of copies because I'm going to give them out to a whole bunch of people, because specifically, Gavin de Becker's book doesn't talk exactly about grooming. He talks about propensity for violence, but this one is needed. Every parent needs to read that to understand when they start seeing these things, like, why is this adult praising my child in a way that's just not right? Again, we talked about Blink too. When you have a gut feeling something's not right, there's a reason for it, and go with it, and teach your children, just because it's a social norm not to say no to adult, that they have the ability to do that and come to you about it. It's one of those things that in this case, it's the worst because of when it went down, but they are just lining up. And I used to tell people, when they put their on the back of their cars, they have the stickers of all the children and the dog's name. I said, you're just giving a predator information to hunt your child. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, we all tell our kids not to talk to strangers, but I think it was one of those online shows that had someone drive up to a child that gets off the bus, and a car pulls up, and they say, hey, your mom, had to take Michael and Spot to the vet. She told me to pick you up. And the kid gets in the car. And when they interview the child, they said, well, why did you get in the car? You're told not to talk to strangers. Well, they knew my brother's name, and they knew my dog's name and my mom's name. They're not a stranger. So all that information on the back of your car is just, again, it's going to these people that they are specifically hunting
Right.
these people and these children, and you have to take that away from them.
Yeah, that's an amazing point, and you do see that stuff, which is crazy. Dr. Berry, have not forgotten about you. We need to get her on the show as a best guest too. This type of harm is also most likely by an individual known to a child. Teaching kids about body boundaries and consent is so important. Dr. Berry, please just email me again, survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com. It's not just a tagline; it is our reality. The best guest in true crime, and right now you are seeing why. I want to get to the text messages in a moment, but let's do it here. Okay, so text messages between Sandra Birchmore and others confirm that Matthew Farwell sexually abused Sandra Birchmore as a child and continued a sexual relationship with her until her death. This is directly from the affidavit that was released on Wednesday as well. For example, on October 5th, 2020, Sandra Birchmore texted one of her friends that Farwell had been having sex with her for the last almost 10 years and that Farwell had taken her virginity before she was 16. On May 20th, 2020, Birchmore told another friend that she had lost her virginity 5 days before the Boston Marathon bombing. So that's some of the information, and I'm going to get to some of the actual text, the verbiage from the text messages in a moment. Shout out to the COA for putting this together after a 3-hour hearing this morning. Scott Duffey, I just want to talk about the federal charges here, and Rob can weigh in. I believe the language is killing a witness. What does this mean? What are these federal? I think it's literally a singular charge, as far as I know. But how do you understand the federal charge here?
Yeah, so you're talking about an investigation, a federal investigation, and anytime you have any interference with a witness, somebody who is assisting in an investigation, a prosecution of somebody else, then you have, in this case, the killing. It is the ultimate obstruction of justice. It is trying to silence a victim. Typically, harassment is what I would see in cases that I have done, where somebody who I'm looking at, who has either been charged or know he's going to or she's going to be charged, and then starts reaching out to victims or witnesses they believe are telling on them. And that in and of itself is a crime. federal, state, and local crimes. And so no different here. You have the silencing of a witness, somebody who is going to come forward and say, hey, there's an individual who is a police officer, or in this specific case, a police officer, and who groomed me, who's taken advantage of me, who's abusing, and so forth. And as that investigation gets forward, you have that victim, that witness, that key witness, who has been killed. And so thereby the killing of a witness in a federal investigation gives that feds, because feds typically are not involved in homicide investigations. So in this regard, you have a federal investigation, you have the killing of a witness, and so thereby it's just another avenue, another way that feds can get involved in something and pursue it to where they're able to remove this individual and then do a sweeping for anybody else that was complicit. And so thereby it is a serious charge. And in the Fed system, we have the death penalty. So there is a lot at stake here.
Yeah, a lot at stake. Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Not only for the charged individual, but anybody else who may, through a domino effect, be charged.
I think there are a lot of frightened police officers in the Stoughton PD and in the surrounding area right now. The Pilgrim Shadow, Anna, to you, mind-boggling. His twin brother was also violating Sandra. I mean, this is, again, beyond the pale, incredibly disturbing. Is this very uncommon? I hope.
The siblings, I did not work with any sibling predator teams, but I think what we have to remember in this case is we have this character, Robert Devine, who's running the Explorers program. He recruits Matthew and William. So in that decision in and of itself, right, we have allegations that Robert was abusing Sandra. Now we have allegations of William and Matthew, and ultimately Matthew ending Sandra's life. So what we have to recognize is that oftentimes predators are able to recognize each other, and it maybe reinforced the culture within that Explorers program. I would be fascinated to learn more about the program itself. I know from the discovery that I looked at, we have over 200 allegations of that program nationwide of abuse and misconduct. So I think what we have to call into question here is that individuals who are running programs, leading programs, supervising programs, often are the agents that are bringing in, whether through direct recruitment or through their inaction to supervise adequately or hold to certain policies, which make children more vulnerable. Or on the other hand, those individuals who are running enormously respectable programs, because they are upholding policies, they're upholding things that keep children safer. And as a parent and as a listener of this program, one of the things you can do is research any program you put your child in. We talked about it a little bit before, that you get to vote with your feet. If you feel uneasy about a program, if you feel uneasy about a director, if you feel uneasy about somebody who's having contact with your child through a big program, your obligation is to do your research. And you can ask what their policies are, and then you can double check, show up randomly. What sort of supervision is at place? Why was she allowed to go with him off to the library by herself? Why was he in a position to tutor her alone? These are the things that I would be asking, especially because we know that predators run on gas. So we're going to take a title or a role or a position, and then we're going to exploit that so that grooming can accelerate and we can have space in isolated ways with a minor.
Yeah, I think I've shared the story I'm about to tell very quickly with you guys before, but I was a pretty decent athlete, but I couldn't hit a baseball worth a what. And I think it was 8th or 9th grade, I got recruited by Barry Levine. who's now dead, by the way. But at the time, he was about 400 pounds and had 2 massive pit bulls. And Barry Levine, was the high school alumnus of the year. He was a sports writer for the local paper. And he also sponsored his own little league team called Barrel, for Barry and the L. And it was the only team where you get these brand new uniforms, brand new cleats. And Barry Levine recruited cute little 8th grade Joel, and gave me carte blanche. He said I could use his batting cage whenever I wanted, lived around the corner. Carm came screeching in, my mother, and said, there's no way in hell you're going over to that guy's house ever, and you're not playing on that team. And I said, but Mom, all my friends are on this team. This is the best team. You got to let me. I tried to guilt her, did everything I could. My mother, who can drop F-bombs, probably said, go F yourself. You're not playing on that team. Sure enough, 3, 4, 5 years later, the best athletes in my high school, the toughest kids, the nicest guys, the smartest guys. One basically came out and said Barry was doing things to them, and then like 9 other guys came out. These are guys that went to Harvard and other schools, and it's going to stick with them for a lifetime. So I guess what I'm trying to say is if something is too good to be true, just like in any other aspect of the world, you stay away from it. So that's go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, one of my stories, like I wasn't home a lot because I was always off running around, but I was home a weekend, and my son was going to this program where I think I mentioned it before, but they're going out for an overnight from Friday to Sunday. And so Friday we're doing all these things, and the den dad, great guy, just didn't have the same look at as I did. But he comes back from the meeting and says, hey, the kids got to stay in fire watch. Like, great. I was in the Marines. Fire watch is a whole thing. And I said, we'll take the midnight to 1 a.m. shift. And he says, well, they want the kids to stay in fire watch with an adult that's not their parent. And I said, what is that? The pedophile fire watch? Like, are you kidding me? Like, you want my son to be in the middle of the night alone with someone like who's not his parent? I was just shocked. I'm like, and I looked at him. I said, someone's been thinking about this all week because he gets to be alone with kids in the middle of the night. Like, are you kidding me? Why would you even? Well, they want the child to learn, interaction with adults that aren't their parents. I said, we can do that during the daylight in front of everyone. We don't need it. Plus, I don't want to be alone at night with a child that may say something and then I lose my job like that. So he goes, what do you want me to do? I said, walk back into the pedophile ring and tell him no. Like, well, I can't do that. I said, okay, I'll stand fire watch midnight to 1 with my son, and 2, he'll stand it the next hour with me, but we're not standing this alone because you don't have the courage or the character to go back in and say no. But you have to look at that. Why else would they even propose that? And for other parents that weren't pedophiles to allow that to happen is just as bad. Like, you got to look at it and say, this is just wrong. And that's where I take it to extreme, but I'm like, I'm not letting my kids stand alone in the middle of the night with an adult that's not their parent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, exactly. If something doesn't smell right, it is probably not right. To Anna's point, there have been, and I guess I wouldn't say I was surprised by this too much, but there've been, I think at least 193 cases, and I think you said over 200 of other allegations of abuse within this Explorers program. There's, I guess, a nonprofit called the Marshall Project that tracks this stuff. What about this program, Anna, this Explorers program? I mean, I can tell you right now, we have like a little Halloween parade in our little town every Halloween, and I walk around with my kids. But my son, who's 5, sees a police officer, and he like can't even believe his own eyes. Like, the police officer always gives him like the little badge, and can't believe that the police officer drives a police car. Then it's just like the highlight of his day. So I guess this program can be important, but it can also be a vehicle for luring kids in, can it?
Yeah. So I think what we have to keep in mind is that most child sexual abuse is not reported. So even the fact that we have 193, let's just wait and keep watching, because I would put money. I'm not a betting woman, but I would put money on the fact that that number will increase, especially in light of Sandra losing her life and this getting some attention. What I would say is that programs, especially ones that involve our children and minors, and also interacting with older children, because the largest rising group of predators are older teens with young kids. So we have to keep that in mind as well. It's not just adults. But what we have to remember is that since predators run on gas, they need to have space that is often isolated with kids. So the grooming process can take place without any hands-on activity. We've touched on this already. We're beginning with flattery, we move to favoritism, we dangle forbidden fruits in front of a child's eyes that are developmentally curious to most kids at that stage anyway. And the fear and the accelerated abuse doesn't even begin until we're through those stages and into the latter stages of the third forbidden fruit stage or the fear stage. So what we have to remember is that a program like this Explorers program already puts the individuals who are volunteering, because Matthew began as an instructor. He was not a police officer when he started. He was recruited by Robert to be in this program alongside his brother. And I'm not sure if it was a volunteer position, but I would be curious about how people are recruited for the role of mentor in the program. I'd also be curious about what sort of training and supervision is done. I'm part of a religious faith community, and everybody who walks in the walls of the school or in the church itself has to do a training for child sexual abuse and prevention and education. I understand that the Explorers program had very lenient policies, if any at all, that required any of their instructors to train on what to look for, because you're absolutely right. The predators are potentially everywhere, but they're not everyone. So me as a mom, I'm relying on all of you and all the other adults who serve alongside my kids to pay attention and to know what to recognize, so that when you see signs of grooming, when you see signs of isolation or pulling apart of a child of a certain type or a certain build or a certain attractive level, that those things put on a red flag in your mind and you think, uh-oh, I've got to intervene here. I've got to report this to a supervisor. If Robert Devine is the supervisor and he's the one who's brought Matthew in and he's molesting some of the children, this is a dumpster fire from the get-go.
Yeah, just crazy to think about. Sandy Jules here, just right back to you quickly, Anna. What percentage of abuse is by family members? Is it typically by another family member?
So it's not typically by a family member. Family members constitute about 35% of child sexual abuse. 54% are acquaintances. So those individuals, again, that are known and trusted, even on the periphery of our lives. So a neighbor or a coach or somebody that we trust in the community. And what we have to keep in mind is that no title, no role, no badge protects you from being a safe adult. So one of the tips I give to parents is have your children identify 1, 2, or 3 caring adults in every setting that they're going to when you're not around. For example, Joel, you're not with your kids right now. I'm not with my kids right now. But you best believe that we've had an out loud conversation about, hey, when you're at school, who do you feel comfortable going to talk to? Oh, I can talk to this person, and this person. Oh, when you're not around and I'm at home, I can go to this person and this person. Just this activity helps a child to recognize, oh, trustworthy adults are going to respect my privacy. They're going to respect my wishes. They're going to check with you first for permission, for decision-making and where I go. And we can see again and again that Matthew did none of those things.
Raymond Weiss saying it's weird to see his comment. Your comment is up here for Scott Duffey. And then we got a few text messages we're going to look at. I really don't understand, Scott, how that whole police force isn't being audited and charged. I mean, Scott, you were part of a police force in a relatively, smaller community. I don't know how many people the town has where you were a police officer, but it's not the size of Philadelphia, that's for sure. What do you think needs to be done from an investigative standpoint with this Stoughton Police Department?
I mean, so from a federal standpoint, the investigation is going to continue, and with the interviews go far-reaching, especially if you have implications of a brother or friends or other people in the department. And then, of course, the Police Explorers program. And so from top down, no one is exempt from being looked at, from being interviewed. So you have an individual crime, you have the abuse by one or more that is being looked at, right? You have the homicide, and then you have the culture. And so I believe this is really just the beginning here.
Yeah, I have a feeling this is going to get a lot uglier. Again, this is from the affidavit. Also on October 5th, 2020, Birchmore prepared a draft text message to Farwell's wife. Birchmore sent this draft text to person one. The text states in part, "I am just messaging to inform you that your husband, Matthew, has been out cheating on you since before you guys were even married. I am aware that Farwell and his wife got married in May 2013, shortly before Birchmore turned 16 years old. There's no known record indicating that draft message was sent to Farwell's wife." And even though we say she's supporting him, it appears too that she was totally blindsided by this. Well, I mean, Anna, what typically happens to the spouses of these offenders, of these predators? Are they shocked for the most part, or do they have an inkling that this is going on and turn a blind eye to it? What is the general sort of consensus on this, if there is one?
Yeah, Joel, I've seen a range. Certainly the reaction can be different when the child being abused lives in the home or belongs to the other spouse. When the abuse is happening by other individuals outside of the home, I think there's much more support in staying with the identified or alleged predator and working through it. Believing, again, we talked a little bit earlier about the amount of lies that predators have to use in order to manipulate situations, in order to gain roles and then maintain a certain status within communities. You don't think that's also occurring within the household, right? That's occurring with their spouses, with their in-laws, with all the other individuals who are in the fabric of their lives. So we cannot assume that these individuals were trustworthy or upfront in any way. And reasonably so, this spouse feels as if the rug's been pulled out from under her, and she has a very challenging decision to make.
This part of the affidavit, Rob D'Amico, is interesting, and we'll tell you why afterwards. But later that evening at approximately 9:08 p.m., Farwell sent Birchmore a text message asking whether he could come by for a second. At approximately 9:10 p.m., Birchmore sends Farwell a text message indicating that when he arrived at her apartment, the door would be open for him. This is the last known outgoing message from Birchmore's cell phone. And there's a timeline that the feds have put together on February 2021, February 1st of 2021. Matthew Farwell, Rob, visits Birchmore's apartment in Canton. Surveillance footage shows him entering her building and leaving 28 minutes later. 3 days later, then 10 weeks pregnant, she's found dead in her apartment by Canton police officers. So how critical, Rob, is this video that they have, video surveillance, coupled with this text, this text that we were just reading about in the affidavit, then the surveillance video showing him going into the apartment. 3 days later, they find her dead.
Yeah, so I think the timeline's looking at, and we talked about, he thought he had control over for how many years, and then I think he probably, when the phone call went into the police department and it got back to him that someone was calling in about this affair type of thing, And I think he thought he was losing control at that point. She wanted to put him on the birth certificate and all these other things that she was not under his control anymore. And I think he asked for a key, and he went to visit her apartment one time, and she made comments to friends that it was odd that he was looking around, and he was looking actually at the closet in depth that she was supposedly, hung herself from. And then you start looking at the timeline of this happening. He claims that he went over there to break up with her, and then because of that breakup, she killed herself.
Mhm.
But when you really look at it, he did some stuff on text. Did he really need to go over there? Because it was a snowstorm that night, and matter of fact, his wife gave birth the next morning to his third child. So he drove over in this crazy snowstorm. He was over there. If you look at how he went in, she had, I think, a load of laundry in the washer and dryer. She just made reservations for her pictures for her newborn, all these other things that, again, don't indicate someone looking at suicide. Goes over there, he tells her, and then he says that, she killed herself. But at this point, some of the people look at it that she was an oversharer. She was telling a lot of people. I think her getting pregnant really got her out of the loop of being under control. She really looked at a future with her baby, and that kind of pushed her to the point where she started demanding some things where he thought it was going to catch up to him. And he goes over and he planned this. If he asked for the key, he scoped out that closet that she ended up, quote, killing herself on the door handle type of thing. And he went over and ended it. And then the next day, again, his wife gives birth to their third child. The timeline just, I think, is going to be very succinct when probably looking at his text messages on how this went down, his anger and his lack of control started going up. And then he did it on this night. And it's really just unbelievable, because you look at it now, what's his third child going to think of? Like, the night before I was born, my father's over there killing his and I say mistress in his
Right.
victim who's pregnant with his child in a way that's just horrible. And also, when we talked about real quick with Scott, was the federal charges, killing a witness or a victim. I think on the state charges, you may see him charged with 2 murders, her and the baby. And obviously in the federal charge, the unborn baby's not a witness or a victim, but state charges are going to follow because they can charge for, just homicide. But the federal charge had to be specific to the federal code. So I think it's just one of those things that the more you unwrap about it, the more disgusting and horrible it gets, that someone's capable of this and then going on in life like nothing's ever happened, to be a police officer and everything else. So it's one of those, the more you dig into it, the more horrors come out of it. And there's going to be a bunch of other victims. All his children are victims. And I think the wife is going to be the victim too. He was a controlling person. He probably controlled her very immensely and told her how this is all made up BS type of thing. And her only thing right now is to stand with him, because maybe she doesn't believe him, or it's going to come to that revelation that he in fact is that person that she probably doesn't want him to be.
Yeah. And hopefully there won't be more victims from the Explorers program, but I have a feeling that other people
I guarantee there's going to be more.
Yeah, that they're going to come forward.
And
Sandra,
this is one of those things where people now start seeing accountability will start coming forward, because a lot of times when victims don't think they can go to anyone or justice is going to be served, they don't come forward. So I think now that they see an action has been taken, there's a place that they can go to. And I've put people in contact with the FBI up there, because they came to me knowing that they wanted to get out the local DA's office, even the state attorney's office, and they had trust in the FBI. And it's not like the FBI doesn't do things wrong. Like we go back to the doctor with the gymnasts. I think the FBI handled that very poorly. And I think an IG just came out, and hopefully as an agency, former, retired, that we take a look at it and say, what did we do wrong and how do we correct it? Because we have to be that last stop where people have trust and confidence to go to. And if we did something wrong, another thing is everyone thinks, if you look at, I went to Ohio State, if you look at the wrestling program there and how the doctor sexually abused college wrestlers. And you look at like college wrestler, when I first, I'm like, these guys are tough. They would flip me around and, have me in a cradle in a second. How are they allowing that to happen? It can happen to anybody based on the situation. And you look at the Penn State football thing. So it's not just in this. You really have to open your eyes to see how much abuse is out there.
Rob, you didn't play football at the Ohio State, did you?
No, no, not close. They have real football players there.
Yeah. Here's the text message. Did we lose Anna? Did she bounce off? I wonder if she had to go because this is her area of expertise, but we'll wrap in a little bit. Sandra Birchmore says, Scott, how would you feel about us having a baby, you being there and signing the birth certificate? There's never going to be a need for your information anyway, so you'll be safe there. And I won't talk about her or your kids. That way we both get what we want. Birchmore says, you asked me the other day what I wanted, and I didn't want to give it to you in the form of an ultimatum. So I am trying to do it with you as a compromise type of thing. Can you tell me what you thought of? He says, okay, that's an in-person discussion. I mean, Scott, obviously there's an ultimatum here. Here's Anna back, but there's sorry, we lost you there for a sec. But there's an ultimatum here. From your perspective, from law enforcement's perspective, and building a case for either the United States attorney or the state, this is a pretty big motive for Matthew Farwell to respond to, right? That he's getting an ultimatum from her.
Yeah, you're starting to see the unraveling, as Rob brought out, the fact that he's controlled her for so many years, and it's beginning to unravel. And so his plan, it's not something he had in mind. And what do? You now start to look at how do I get control back? And ultimately it's silencing. It's just an escalation. It's to see how it goes from just the horrible to the horrible. Meaning you have a child that has been groomed, abused, and then you have the groomer, the abuser, also with a tremendous amount of power as his authority as a police officer, and now trying to figure out, what do I do? How do I do it? And that's what I love about modern technology. The fact that you're talking about years ago, and for this to still be able to be something that is to be able to be recovered and ultimately used. I as it's been said on this program and before, you have the words from the grave coming out to bite you, to where it's just, there's no stopping it. And you think that you've done it. Okay, I've silenced. I now am complete control, but you're not. And you never were. And so that's what I enjoy about the pieces of this investigative puzzle with modern technology, to be able to do what should have been done the day that she was recovered, that an investigation right off the chute, and you would have valuable physical evidence that would not have gone missed. Because I imagine, as we've talked before, suicide, homicide, and when a suicide is made to look, or a homicide is made to look like a suicide, and for any officer, as I teach my young recruits, any officer going to a death scene, do not have any assumptions. Do not think one iota of, oh, well, this is an accidental, this is natural, this is something other than at the hands of another. treated absolutely as the worst, because you'll never be able to go back to that scene and undo the harm that's been done by these false assumptions. So I'm glad to see these resources being used and be able to put together a fantastic timeline, and then everything else that follows suit with witness testimony.
Yeah. Just back to these text messages. So there were graphic text messages obviously exchanged between the two, talking about the big day Matthew Farwell did of taking Sandra Birchmore's virginity. That was a quote, the big day. All this, not so surprisingly, Anna, now reportedly began after they friended each other. I don't know who friended who on Facebook. Rob D'Amico was talking about don't give signs to predators, like on the outside of your car with those little silly stickers with the family so they know how many brothers and sisters you have, that sort of thing. But the real issue, the real problem, the real sort of black hole that kids can get swallowed up into by predators now is online, right at home. Right now, I've had people on who say that the predators are in your kids' bedrooms, literally, because your kids are on the laptop. So what can be done about that? I have a 10-year-old daughter who's now always talking to her friends on the computer. My boy plays Roblox, which is, still don't know what it is, but they play with other kids. What can you do to make sure that they're not getting lured in online by a person who, as Rob puts it, obsesses about this day and night about how to get these children? What can be done?
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and one that is top of mind for most adults parenting small children or children in general. Seems to be that the age of children getting devices that is connected is younger and younger. So one of the things you can start off with is be the cornerstone for your child. Be the person who is asking about, hey, what do you do when you go online? Where do you go? Show me. Let's pull up devices in public spaces like a living room or a kitchen or a dining room table. What's happened with devices is they get smaller and smaller, and more kids are wearing headphones or buds of some kind in their ears. And we talked a little bit earlier about isolation, that one of the hallmarks of a predator is that they're going to isolate. So in games, let's take Roblox since you brought it up. Roblox is in a lot of hot water right now because they have just approved to have erotic style games available for kids.
COE,
And
delete that app and go ahead.
delete. Roblox, not good. No bueno. So one of the things we have to keep in mind is that in these games are often embedded chat systems. So even though your child is like, I'm just going on because I want to dress up and play like I'm a police officer because I, revere them and I respect them, and maybe one day I'll be working with EMS and handling the situation. But these programs and predators know this is like a cheat sheet for how to find young 10-year-old boys. I mean, you were saying that story, Joel, earlier about Barry knew exactly how to find young, athletic build boys in the neighborhood. And similarly, predators know if I want to get a 6-year-old girl, I'm going to find a Hello Kitty game. I'm going to find a My Little Pony game. I'm going to go on to certain games that are going to draw stereotypically this type of child and this type of age. So what we have to look out for is, number one, be the cornerstone. Bring it up. Bring up mock situations with your child. Hey, what would you do if somebody asked if they could DM you? What would you do if you got DM means direct message? What would you do if somebody direct messaged you that they wanted to talk to you on the phone or they wanted to talk to you late at night? Again, these opportunities for children to dialogue with us openly mean that we've eliminated the opportunity for secrecy. I know, I'm not sure when or if we've talked about this before, Joel, but one of the things that we as parents get to do is we get to explain to kids the difference between privacy, secrecy, and surprise. And what predators do is they exploit secrecy. Privacy and secrecy are very different entities. And we have to be the ones as the parents to explicitly guide them and to say, hey, did you read about this case that's happening? Or do you know that there's this kid online who went on Snapchat and bought pills that he thought were, one thing, but actually were fentanyl laced and he's dead. On an age appropriate level, of course, we're not trying to scare 10-year-olds. But what we as parents need to remember is that we're handing kids a device that often we can't even control ourselves. We aren't equipped to understand the parental controls. And these devices were not put into place by 40 or something year old moms. They were put into place to keep kids engaged, keep kids online, and use them as currency. And predators are benefiting from those decisions. And until we tackle big tech, the only thing we can do is set limitations, bring these games that want to isolate kids on a tiny little screen with closed off audio and bring it into the forefront, cast it up on a television. Well, let's get back to old school where we used to watch one thing. Okay, you're going to play Roblox. Fine, let's cast it onto the main TV and we're all going to play. And daddy's going to get a remote, and mommy's going to get a remote, and we're all going to engage in it. We're going to shut off the chat ability within games. That's critical, because if predators can isolate your child through a game, then they get information to meet them on a different platform altogether. And then we're off to the races.
Yeah. I mean, what's so crazy is that, I don't even know how to do half of this stuff, like shutting off the chat. My kids would, but I don't even know how to do it. So it's this constant struggle. COE, I hope you are listening. She's going to get the kids. And you know what? I'm just throwing out their iPads and iPhones, and I'm going to melt them in a bonfire outside. Scott, just a couple quick things, then we'll get final thoughts. Scott, Scott, does this make you sad? Tell your kids not to talk to police. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, it's so I would say no. That's not the right answer. As we talk about the worst of the worst, we also have to remember the best of the best, and there are plenty more good guys than bad guys, but there are plenty of bad guys, and so police are good, and we just have to continue with everything else in play, check, audit, so forth, buddy system, all those things. Don't check common sense at the door. Always be suspicious of everybody. I'm suspicious of everybody. It's probably a trait built into me through my life as law enforcement. And like Rob, my kids have probably suffered some at the helm of like, hey, we're not going to do that because there's danger that lurks around the corner, right? So but as my last one nears adulthood, only months away, and there are things that I may be remiss about for them, maybe not participating in one thing or another, but ultimately don't check your common sense at the door, and like when you are in need, call the police. And we have a great PAL system, police athletic lead, but I also know that is a top to bottom, a well put together system where their common sense is not checked at the door. There are plenty of adults at any given time where everybody gets to overlook somebody else's shoulder, as well as they should. And so when you just put these really simple ideas into practice of just always watching out for another, and both adults and children, it's amazing what can work and how you can root out those that are lurking and make them afraid to want to participate in that, and say, hey, there's not going to be a victim for me here, and so I'll go elsewhere. It's like anything else. When you see crime, law enforcement and the community, you want to saturate with good, to say, go somewhere else. And it should be no different here, that just make it very, very difficult for somebody to lurk, to commit a crime, to groom, where they are moved on, and ultimately good investigation will hopefully continue to where this will be maybe a model for what should never happen, and ultimately, like Boy Scouts and every other major organization that has suffered tremendous scandal, what can be put in place that can be practiced by everyone, and to where children ultimately are safe. Period.
I'll be the judge here. Well said, Scott. Hacker Ryan Montgomery, never heard of this guy, but what do I know? Has been on many videos showing how quickly these predators respond to kids on these games. He goes into the games live on the video. He gets adults reaching out within 30 seconds. I mean, there's no doubt that technology has made it a lot easier for these people to literally, I mean, I guess figuratively get in the bedroom, but literally be there talking to your child. Messages from February 2019. This is the last bit I want to get to real quickly. Reveal that Birchmore, Sandra said she was happy that Farwell took her virginity and that she, quote unquote, had butterflies about it, Anna. He later replied saying it was a big thing to be the first, calling it a, quote unquote, big day. Then on another text, she recalls the date she lost her virginity on April 10th, 2013. Calling it the best day of her life. The couple discusses all this again in June of 2020. And there's also text messages that show that he was doing this while on the clock. He says to her, "I'm going to sneak away from work real quick." And he says, "Yes, I'll be on the clock." These text messages are really damning. But the thing that's most upsetting to me, Anna, is she says it was the best day of her life. And looks at it in a positive light. Is this an expected outcome of a child that has been groomed for years?
Well, Joel, this being referred to as a couple is stomach turning. This is not a couple. This is not an affair. This is not a relationship. This was the grooming process done to perfection. What do I mean by that? Well, grooming starts off sweet. It is always sweet at the beginning. You and I have talked about this, and I describe grooming like a perverse form of courtship. So no wonder, imagine how easy it is to impress a 12 or 13-year-old girl, right? It's not the same thing as trying to impress a 35-year-old grown woman who's your equal. So in this case, when we're thinking about this, this distorted manipulation that began with flattery. It began with, "You're so special. I'm going to take you under my wing. I'm going to tutor you. I'm going to go to your house. I'm going to spend time with you." Can you imagine how rewarding and how special that makes a child feel? So we as caregivers and we as adults in communities need to remember that when a child is vulnerable and needs additional attention or caregiving, that is when they're especially at risk for a predator to swoop in. So we as caring adults need to be constantly attuned to not just our own kids, but other kids. So this girl was raised in community in Canton. And what we have to think about here is how many adults saw, witnessed, observed, recognized that there was this incremental amount of time that she was spending with this individual. Who else noticed that she was going to the library with him? Did the librarian not notice? Did the school not notice? Because grooming is selective, but it's also incremental. It's going to start off sweet, but it is going to end in fear and threats and danger.
Man, this stuff is so scary. Look at this. Michelle Pretorius in South Africa. I've just downloaded Duck Duck Room, which I recommend to everybody. My husband does not know that he is reading it next. From Lisa. Great guest, Joel. I'm learning a lot from them. Always an education for me whenever I host this show, because we do have the best guests in true crime, including Sierra One Consulting's Rob D'Amico. The guy's an American hero, 39 years serving his country, many of them in the military and many of them in the FBI in elite units. Rob, open platform for your closing thoughts here, whatever you want to get out.
Well, one, I think Anna just hit on it on the nose. It's incremental, but imagine even as an adult that you have someone at work who mentors you, a high up in the company who says, "Hey, I'm going to take you on. You're going to be my project." Think how that makes you feel as an adult. Now put it down to a 10, 11, or 12-year-old from an authority figure like a police officer, a coach, or something like that, like you had with the baseball team. So it is powerful stuff being but it's incremental, and then they will test it and they'll test it and then they'll select it, and everyone else has to. We call it law enforcement. Like you're in, like as a cop, you're in orange when you're on the job looking for danger and stuff like that. And some people just live in white. They just don't assume bad about anyone. They don't assume, like when I went to a bank on a Friday, I always say, like, I didn't take just one magazine in with my gun. I took two, because banks are always robbed on Fridays because people want money for the weekend. And living in orange is not as easy as living in white, where you just assume the best. So as a parent, you have to at least be in yellow. You have to understand that these threats are out there, especially with video games. And like you said, they're doing it in private, and they get on. Predators know where to be, and they know how to do all this. So paying attention is really big. Another thing, I think you're going to see a whole bunch of other charges come out of this. This is just the first. I think it's one of the biggest, because it's so horrendous of what happened. But you're going to see other ones come out. And I'm hoping this is a lead to that cultural change within police departments in the thin blue line. The thin blue line is there to protect you, but it's not there to protect you just because someone else is wearing a badge that is doing harm to the people that we swore to support and defend. And it's worse when they do that. That you have to say, if we're going to point out the good, then we really, really have to point out the bad and go after it. And it doesn't mean worse for law enforcement. I hate to see all these comments about don't talk to the police. That's not it. These predators are everywhere. They are everywhere out there, and they use these positions that get close to victims in a way that's really troubling. But it's out there everywhere. You can still, again, if you can't trust the police department, then there's a different police department, state police, FBI, whoever. There's much more better than there is bad. You just have to have your eyes open and say, just because he is a coach, a police officer, whatever, does not preclude him from being a predator. And I think that's one of the best things if we can take off this panel. Again, I think Anna's book is amazing. I haven't read it yet, but what she talked about, I'm going to push it out, because there wasn't too many books that really specifically went down the road to show parents what to look for, because you will see the process. If you start looking for it, you're going to see it if it's happening. And then to be able to say, wait a second, I'm going to stop this before it gets to the isolation phase where they're going to actually execute. And that's the needed thing. You have to get in between that, all the prior steps before you get to the one where they can actually do something.
I love Rob's passion. Rob, thanks for being here. Dippity Doo says somehow you only look 39, even though you spent 39 years. Best Nancy here. Best panel today. Before I say goodbye to Scott and Anna as well and give them their final say, I just had something that trigger in my mind, Anna, that I'm curious about. This guy Matthew Farwell is now going to be sitting in jail, likely prison, for a very, 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 very long time. You think he's in there saying, what did I do wrong? Like, do you think he understand? Do these predators know that they are predators, or do they think in their twisted mind that they're acting normally?
Oh, Joel, you like to crack it open right towards the end. So, okay, I want to answer this succinctly.
Well, I just bring it up because I could see him. My parents are therapists, so I could see him sitting in jail going, I don't get the big deal. What's the big deal? I was just sleeping with a girl. Like, that's what I see him saying to himself.
So what I noticed counseling sex offenders was an absence of empathy, an absence of the ability to recognize that a 12-year-old girl might want the attention, but she doesn't want to have a sexual partner that's a 50-year-old man. The sense of I'm giving them a gift. I'm doing them a favor. I am showing them affection. Their parents aren't showing them affection. This kid is lost. This kid is lonely. I'm filling a gap in them, is an often strong sentiment that I heard from the offenders that I worked with. And that has fueled a lot of my mission to educate adults that even if you're feeling like an inadequate parent, which we all do at times, including me, we still have to remember that our kids' gaze, their eyesight, and their ears are constantly attuned to us. So when we're, holding a phone and half listening to them, if we've got the radio on and 12 other things and we're on a phone call, that is communicating something to our kids. And these predators recognize kids' vulnerabilities and those gaps within family systems, within communities, within their financial situations, and they will exploit it. So we as caregivers need to constantly be attuned to what are the gaps that my child's experiencing, and then talk about it, bring it out into the open, and figure out ways in which to fill that.
This is why I'm going to go home. It's important, and I'm really guilty of this, of always trying out this. Not complaining. I'm making that very clear, but I'm working on this basically 24/7, even though it doesn't always seem that way. And I just have to be more aware, to be present with my kids. So when this is over today, I'm hanging with my kids and I'm going to do stuff with them. And I do make it a point to do that. But I think in today's hustle and bustle in this world, we all have to make it a point to be a little more present with our own children. Jimmy McNutty, this show with a panel of best guests is why I say STS is a game changer in podcasting. We're only getting going, Jimmy. I've got a big thing I'm working on as quickly as I can. That's going to hopefully really change the game. But it's what we call a tease in TV news. Scott Duffey, what can I say about him? I'm just glad to call the man my friend. He is the director of Wilmington University's Criminal Justice Institute. He's a retired FBI agent out of Delaware. He's 5.5 years as a police officer, a diehard Phillies fan. And when I'm with him, I always have a good time. And when I'm with the Rob D'Amico and Phil Waters, and I always feel like if anything goes down, I can just run right behind their backs and hide and have them take care and protect me. So for all those bad police officers out there, I've met all three of these guys. These are the cream of the crop, the best of the best. Scott Duffey, your final thoughts anywhere you want to go with it.
Yeah, no, thanks, Joel, for always tackling these tough issues and cases. And a true pleasure. Second time on with Rob and first time on with Anna. Just amazing. And I always like to learn myself from your panelists. And ultimately, I'll just reiterate, yes, it's tough. I spent many hours in people's homes on search warrants, affidavits I've done myself, and of course assisting my many colleagues. And it's heart-wrenching to be in these type of homes with very horrible things that have been done, especially against children, and then to go home and be with your own children and your loved ones. And so having raised 4 kids with my wife, it is a very tough and loving responsibility. But like anything else, technology started to come on the horizon with games and so forth as my kids were reaching that age. And ultimately, never stop being suspicious, never stop using common sense. If something irks you or causes you to ask a question, even if it's internally, follow up with a good question and get to the bottom of it. And any parent, as I've been on panels with parents in digital safety, just never, the very way you would react with a car pulling up and a stranger reaching out to your child right in front of you be the exact same way suspicious and react the same way to anything that stands out online or when you drop your child off for what could be a slumber party at a friend's house, a church, a police department. Just always be involved, be present, as Rob and Anna have said, and never stop questioning. And it, we will get through this, and there's a lot more good out there. I have hope for.
Always positive, Scott. Soothing Scott Duffey is always positive. If you're learning from the show, please subscribe. Please like, and most importantly, please share this show with friends. Tell them about it. It's how we grow. It's how we can continue to pump out content. Last but not least, of course, Anna Sonoda, the expert in all this, a licensed social worker and the author of Duck, Duck, Groom, Understanding How a Child Becomes a Target. People are buying it. Rob's going to be gifting it. I'm getting it. The COE is going to be reading it. Highly recommend it. Anna, same with you. Open-ended, whatever you think is most important. And thanks to all of you for giving us all this amazing advice.
Well, thank you, Joel, and thank you for the other panelists. I've learned a lot. I think I would just say that predators may be everywhere, but they're not everyone, and their behavior sets them apart. So if any of the listeners are having, long streams of paranoia listening to this and thinking, I'll never trust anyone ever again, calm down. That's not true. But what we have to do is we have to be attuned to behavior. So predators stand out in their behavior. Grooming is observable. Individuals who are in Sandra's life probably recognized something wasn't quite right, recognized signs that she was getting too close to him. It is a perverse form of courtship. So if at any time you feel like somebody is taking a shine to your child, making sure that there are exceptional environments for them to be in that typically reject your participation, your supervision, or your oversight, that is an enormous alarm bell. And like always, I want people to know that predators run on gas. It's not just about grooming. Real substantive abuse progresses in isolated spaces. So if you are concerned or have thoughts that grooming has gone on, you can always interrupt grooming. It is interruptible when you know what to look for. So I would say be prepared, don't be paranoid, and let's look out for the kind adults and have those conversations with our kids. And we can start tonight.
Really well said. It's starting with me tonight, starting right after I get these, or COE brings the kids home from school. I see you, La Mesa. Shout out to La Mesa, Ida Shaw, JD. Myron Sanchez, I've seen you in the chat. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're back. Hope to get to know you better. Best Nancy, Ned Smith, of course, Bayou Babe. I'm just looking at some of the names here of friends of the show who are always here. We appreciate you. Appreciate the best guests. Love you, America. Love you, Georgia. Love you, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Love you, New Jersey and Florida. That's what Rob and I have in common. And, of course, Stoughton, Mass. We're here for you, for the community. And, obviously, this is all about Sandra Birchmore and getting justice for her. We're right back on Monday. For those of you in America, have a happy Labor Day weekend. But there are a lot of people around the world. So be safe. Have a good weekend. Spend time with your children, whether they're two-legged or four-legged. I'm going to take my four-legged ones to the park. Priorities before my two-legged ones. And we'll see you Monday with more Donna Adelson. And she's got another hearing on Friday. We're all over that. And then I head up to Tallahassee to cover that trial. And a special shout-out to Phil Waters, America's most respected detective, who could not make it for the usual Great Scott, your true crime Phil. But he is here in spirit. Stick around for 1 second if you can.